2. Talk about the Husk of Opulent Dreams artifact set requires some knowledge of other things that happen in the story of the game, so consider this a spoiler warning for the event Unreconciled Stars, as well as Raiden Shogun's Archon Quest and Story Quest. 500 years ago, during the cataclysm that destroyed Kainria, the original Electro Archon Raiden Makoto was killed, and her twin sister and body double Raiden A took up Makoto's sword and title as the new Electro Archon. Since basically nobody knew that A was even alive at all, the switch between Makoto and A went almost entirely unknown to the general populace of Inazuma. A was horrified at the deaths that she attributed to the negligence or outright malice from Celestia, and her Archon's ideal became eternity, in stark contrast to Makoto's ideal of transience. As she says it, something was lost with each step forward. That is not a good Raiden Shogun impression. Sometime after assuming the role of the Archon, A used a technique that is undefined and unknown to start creating vessels for her consciousness in the form of humanoid puppets to stave off the effects of the heavenly principle's so-called erosion. Now, this force erosion wears down the minds and spirits of all beings over time, and even the powers of the Geo-Archon Morax could not stave them off. Morax himself cites the principle of erosion as one of his main factors for the decision that he made in his own Archon quest, and it was against this principle that A became obsessed with fighting, and so she created her first puppet. This puppet was initially made to house A's consciousness and her gnosis, but once she placed the gnosis within the puppet, she saw that the puppet shed tears and displayed emotions that would work counter to the pursuit of eternity. The puppet did, however, have a certain amount of power inherent to himself, being a creation that was meant to house the spirit of the Archon, so there's that going on for him. Raiden Shogun's line about Kunikuzushi says that she hasn't deactivated or destroyed him because she feels like she owes him something, but whatever the case, she sealed him and his powers, and put him to sleep for a period of time because she deemed him to be too fragile, both as a doll and as a human. Sometime later, when he awoke in a secluded hall at the Grand Narukami Shrine one day, he had to his name only a golden feather-shaped token that the Raiden Shogun had left with him that acted as proof of identity related to the Shogun. Because of this marker, he was allowed to go on his way and was left unmolested by any authorities, allowed to wander the land as he saw fit. While doing so, he observed the hearts of many people of all walks of life, but found himself exceptionally lacking a heart of his own, as well as any memories of anything except his tenuous connection to the Shogun. As the so-called wandering eccentric, he was found by a low-ranking samurai named Katsuragi, whose rank was given by the now shogunate inspector, Nagamasa Mikoshi. Nagamasa was a bladesmith who worked in Tatarasuna, the region most rife with crystal marrow in all of Inazuma. Katsuragi and the eccentric made friends, and the eccentric joined the Tatarasuna group there. During this time, Nagamasa forged a crazy strong and super beautiful blade that he called the Daitatara Nagamasa, a masterpiece of metalworking. And this was back before they had the forge made from the technology from Fontaine as well, so this was like handmade stuff. The eccentric loses himself somewhere for a while, and the group looks for him unsuccessfully. However, Nagamasa was so obsessed with repairing the reputation of his family name after a great betrayal that had happened in the past toward the Shogun, that his devotion to righteousness had him fatally wound Katsuragi after some small indiscretion that we don't really know about. But as a result, when the eccentric came back, he and Nagamasa came to blows, and well, nobody knows what happened to Nagamasa, but the eccentric came out the other end unscathed. Not content to have his revenge directly on Nagamasa alone, the eccentric then plotted and schemed to bring down the entirety of the bladesmithing tradition in Inazuma, succeeding in destroying 3 of the 5 traditions, and all but eradicating the 4th, before just kind of losing interest. Getting bored. Since he had no name before then, he took on that name, Kunikuzushi. In Japanese, this is a somewhat complicated compound word that means country unbalancer, though the case could be made that a better translation would be country destroyer. Both in real life and in the Inazuman theatrical tradition, this name refers to a type of stock character that's often used in political drama plots, that sort of schemes and plots to orchestrate the fall of a kingdom or a country or a grand house, which may be why he took this archetype as a name. Anyway, from that point on, it seems that he wandered the length and the breadth of the lands of Inazuma, Liyue, and Mondstadt, by land and by sea, witnessing all sorts of people's lives and experiencing all kinds of emotions, owing to the fact that he was just better than humans, but still resembled one on the outside, and that the Raiden Shogun did not meddle with his doings for reasons he didn't care to ask. He decided that he was free of the judgment of the gods, and did whatever he wanted to. It was around then that the Fatui Dottore found him, and sensed within him the supernatural nature of his body and powers. Dottore offered Kunikuzushi the opportunity to become one of the Fatui Harbingers, and Kunikuzushi accepts this offer, becoming Scaramouche the Balladeer. Because when you become one of the Harbingers, you are required, at least in principle, to discard all you were and devote yourself sort of only to this set of principles. The artifacts record Scaramouche's goings even so recently as after Signora got a hold of one of the Archon's Gnosis. I'm not sure which, but given the line, she threw a small crystal sphere at the youth from afar, which, yes, I know that the Gnosis don't look like crystal spheres, but it's not impossible that she may have put it into a sphere or something like that in order to keep it. I would hazard that this was sometime after Morax's Gnosis was acquired, and during the time when the Balladeer was overseeing the factory production of delusions in Inazuma. The artifact set itself is actually super apt to the story it holds because it bestows stacks of curiosity on the character that equips it, and this sort of mimics the curious travels that Scaramouche did while known as the Wandering Eccentric and as Kunikuzushi, where during those times the things he did were, in his own words, all just a little experiment in human nature. The set gives a hefty defense bonus, and also the Curiosity Stacks effect, which further buffs defense and geo damage with each stack, and you get a stack by doing geo damage. You can obtain this artifact set in the Slumbering Court domain, which is a place that's said to have been built before Seidai Island even had the name Seidai Island, and before it was tainted by the bird and all of that, and whose insides will never change their appearance. The domain favors characters who can wield lightning, which tracks if we're to assume that Scaramouche is an Electro character, but not if we are to assume that the artifact set reflects his abilities as a Geo character. Either way, though, the domain doesn't really fit with the story of the artifact set. I guess we can't always have spot-on matches when a domain can give up to 4 different artifact sets as rewards. The sword, which is now called Katsuragi Kiri Nagamasa, on the count of Nagamasa using it to cut down Katsuragi, is a craftable sword whose schematics you can find in the armory at Tatarasuna, which ostensibly is the place where the duel between Scaramouche and Nagamasa went down, and where the blade was both originally forged and attempted to be destroyed. There's also one piece of the Pale Flame set that's in reference to Scaramouche specifically. It's the cup, the Surpassing Cup. You can get the Pale Flame set, which itself is just a pastiche of relics relating to various Fatui Harbingers and their origins, in the Ridge Watch domain in Liyue, which, I mean, I guess it sort of metaphorically works because the Ridge Watch is said to be in a place where it can watch both the north and the south, and that is kind of metaphoric to how the Fatui have put themselves in as spies everywhere and can watch everywhere, but I don't know, I guess that's not perfect either. It's wild because this artifact set isn't just ancient history, it also follows things all the way up until very recently in the story. It seems to have been items that Scaramouche actually owned himself, at least in the case of the feather. So when and if Scaramouche becomes a playable character, it would be really weird if these artifacts didn't work with his kit. This is what leads me to believe that he would be a Geo character despite his origin as a vessel for the Electro Archon. I mean, I guess it's not impossible that Dottore gave him a Geo delusion, and that that's the second heart that his stuff references, or perhaps that his powers were not electro-based because he was technically just a proof of concept experiment by A, and were instead drawn from a similar concept as albedos. Since they're both artificial humans, this is a whole lot of... The fact that A made several more puppets and discarded them all, as well as albedos just existence in general leads to a line of questioning toward the existence of automatons and artificial humans in the wider world, but I think that's a story for another video. There is a lot more for all of the characters that show up in this script, like Dottore and Nagamasa and all of them, but as I'm trying to only really focus on the stuff surrounding the artifact set, I had to leave a lot of that history out. Nevertheless, there's a ton to unpack here as well. I've heard some theories about why Scaramouche acts the way he does, and how he might act now that he's got the Raiden Shogun's Gnosis again, but I think that will also have to be part of another discussion. So, we've covered the Husk of Opulent Dreams artifact set, one of the pieces from the Pale Flame set, and the Katsuragi Kiri Nagamasa weapon. What do you want me to cover next? Obviously, there's a ton of it, and this one was actually suggested by a viewer. Here's the comment that it came from. Here's the comment that this suggestion came from. Thank you very much for watching and suggesting it. If there is something that's interesting to you, just say so, and I will look into it. This is the third video that I've done in like 3 weeks, which is insane considering for a long time now I've been working off of the big sad and lots of busy and have not had like devotion, or I haven't had the ability to make videos just from a mental standpoint. So I'm glad that I'm able to do this again right now, and I hope that I am still able to continue doing it as time continues to pass and all of that. I am in the second half of the third semester of my master's degree now, so next semester should just be my taking the class where we talk about our strategies for the master's thesis that I'm writing, and then also writing the thesis itself. So anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.